Well, yeah, making a video. Yeah, conference report. Made a lousy, rotten, stinking, cruddy video as one of a response to the act of whatever Smiling Joe guy. Which was just a horrible video, a slander of Benatar, and such a simplistic analysis. And so then conference report makes this video, and then he posts to a PDF file by a woman, I think. Campbell Brown, I think, who might be, I don't know who it is. So I wish conference report, like in the PDF, it doesn't give us any reference to who this woman is. Cambridge Press, I guess, just publishes. But yeah, we should do what conference report does, and we should bring up her other works, her other literature. Yeah, because I think we'll find that maybe there's grounds to find her an incredible character. Yeah, maybe. So anyway, her analysis is just idiotic. And so I found another old article of some guy who critiqued Benatar, and so I'll take the text of those and make a web page out of it, because I hate PDF files. And yeah, both analyses are just missing the point. That need is a phenomenon of the living. That an inanimate universe doesn't need anything. There's no force requiring anything, demanding anything, and that all need is basically derived out of some sort of negative energy. You can't need something unless you're somehow imperfect or broken or flawed or insufficient the way you are. And that's the dilemma of need. And that's why the Benatar asymmetry works. It basically says the need not to make a mess is the game. Cleaning up the mess, that need, is interesting, but yeah, the need to not make the mess is the first need. It's the first cause in a causal chain. But I'll get to that later, because the first part of Fred's video, he's doing the same old crap where he's implying that there's mysteries here in the universe, that we don't understand what this is. I don't understand what these cicadas are doing. I don't understand what humans are doing. I don't understand what the earth is. The whole thing is just too understandable, too mysterious, too beyond our comprehension. We can't embody it. And it's just such a pile of crap. Our psychology is a known phenomenon. Our origins, I'm not going to go over it, but yeah, it's all written in a book. We nailed it. And the mysteries are not, they just don't exist. And, it's basically just this idea that sentience creates a problem. It creates this vulnerability to harm. And that's the game here. And these people want to just create this delusion in people's heads that there's something we can accomplish that will justify the harm that existence creates. That there's some value, innate and intrinsic, in what we're doing that justifies the harm. And this woman's analysis is just, insanely obtuse. And it's not much better than somebody saying, well, there's intrinsic value in perfectly functioning nuclear power that has no risk. And even if there's only a 1 in a million chance that can happen, we have to value that positive. And it wouldn't matter how many piles of negative possibility and probability you stack up. I guess that's the key word. They have they're wishing to extract all reasonable probability from the equation and try to use the math merely to measure the extremes. And there's just no point in doing that. I mean, if somebody just asks you, is it good, to put criminals in jail? But they don't tell you that the price we're going to pay to put criminals in jail is that we're going to kill 500 babies or whatever the thing would be. We're going to step on 1 million kittens, or we're going to put 1 million innocent people in jail. Well, once you put the condition on that value, you say, of course it doesn't make sense. It doesn't have enough. It doesn't have enough value to justify, this 1 in a million possibility. So if you say there's only a 1 in a million possibility that you can do the thing, it's obviously relevant. You can't negate probability as part of the equation. Because Benatar would concede, just as I would concede, it's a zero-sum game. So if you play it perfectly, you can get to zero. But there's no realistic prospect of perfection. So it's cheating his argument so deplorably to sit there and argue as if the zero sum is the probability and not the highly unlikely improbability. So anyway, achieving perfection. Yeah, well, I didn't want to get to that argument. I don't know. It's just so hard to say which argument is more important. Because this "we don't know" argument is really irritating. And it sort of relates to the fact that we sort of do know what we are in terms of being need generators. By existing, we generate need. We generate a problem needing resolution. Just as there are no problems on Mars, because there are no Martians in jeopardy, there are none in despair, there are none in want, or in thirst, or in hunger. So there's no necessary cure needed. There's nothing, we don't have to engineer a solution for the Martian problem, because the Martian problem doesn't exist. And that's the nature of coming into existence, that you now become problematic, where when you didn't exist, there could be no problem. It's just as clear as the comparison between us and a desolate planet. On Earth, there is a problem, that needs resolution. All kinds of problems in need of solution. And there are no problems on the non-populated planets, and there is no rationally perceived, no argumentation being made that there is any need to populate those planets so they can have a problem. I mean, there really isn't. You can't construct the, oh my gosh, we're squandering perfectly good real estate by not having, sentient Martians roaming it, creating problems. I mean, really, it's just ludicrous. Yeah, I mean, it really should just end there. Deal with that truth, that need is not is something that only a sentient can create. The necessity for something to happen, these are things that are created when you create something vulnerable. They aren't created by our capacity to perceive profit. And even the whole idea that there is such a thing as a profit maybe is a good word to play with. Is there really any profit in life without the investment, without the sacrifice that creates it? I mean, workers make profit for the rich. We know that. We know their profit doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from somebody's sweat. It comes from somebody's sacrifice, somebody's endurance of a harm. And in every aspect, that is what creates something called a good, is it has to be manufactured out of something. It's just not for free. And so even in this older guy's analysis, that was just totally ignored with a thought experiment that basically, where it is proposed, and I guess it is proposed in Benatar's book briefly, that maybe it is possible, conceivably, to create a life form that comes into existence and experiences nothing but good. And I'd almost argue that I don't think that's possible unless at least you create the artificial memories and the artificial perception of harm And you have to create the hunger for the cupcake to have value, for there to be the cessation of the desire. I mean, without desire, there's just no game of satisfaction. You need before you can be satisfied. You have to be in some sort of deprivated condition. You have to be in need of entertainment before you can be entertained. Just the way it works. And they're just denying that function. Well, that's it. They're denying it. They're rejecting that as a truth. That's one of their premises, their fallacies that they base their logic on, that I think is certainly much more vulnerable to critique than anything Benatar proposes. So again, I just don't want to fall into this trap of, consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction. But, we do know what we are. And, the psychology that runs us. I guess we could make other comparisons. So let's say life was alcoholism. You're making the argument that there's no point in it. It can't do anything productive. It can only do something negative. And that there might be some ideal circumstance where the alcoholic doesn't negatively affect any other people. He enjoys being alcoholic, just sitting there wanting to drink and satisfying his need to drink. But we know with the real world, that's not an alcoholic even. It's so unrealistic, an alcoholic, so not a real alcoholic. There's no point in even calling it that. But I mean, it's kind of a simple argument that why would you create that dependency? It can't do any real good, and it opens this huge door, a huge volume of harm. And that's what life does. It makes you vulnerable to incredible nastiness, and you have no real potential to do anything purely good. Certainly in your life you could comfort the afflicted, but the afflicted have to exist and need comforting for you to be able to derive your purpose from that. So outside of the existence of the afflicted, let's say everybody else was a cybernetic organism and they didn't feel. So you could derive no purpose in life from pleasing other people, or avoiding harming other people even. That you couldn't make yourself a good guy by merely not hurting or satisfying the needs of others. You still couldn't do anything except satisfy your own desires. You create the initial state of need. You create the need. But you couldn't satisfy any need the environment has, the universe has. Nothing would need you to exist. And nothing could be solved or resolved by your existence. So if we take your capacity to harm anything away and give you a perfectly neutral world to play in, there's nothing you can do in that world. So it is only through the existence of the harmables that we can derive any functional goodness out of our lives beyond selfish gratifications of desires that didn't need to exist. That didn't need to exist. And that's a real fact. The fact that the need doesn't need to be created. That there is no rape being prevented by creating the needful organism is just a fact. And I'll go back to that analogy because I think it does say it a little better, that there's this difference between needs you feel that are motivated, or desires the desire, let's say if there's a woman being raped and there's chocolate cake. Now the desire I have to resolve the problem, that is the harm of that woman, that desire is rationally based. The desire I have to eat a cupcake is biologically based. It's imposed by the existence of my needful biology. I created that need. My existence creates that need for me to consume a cupcake, where the need for that harm to be prevented is universal. It doesn't exist in me. I interpret it. I create a realization, an understanding. I recognize that need. I create that need. It's that simple. Can't you understand that? One need I create, the other need is created by the circumstance, and I really recognize the need. I mean, a recognized need is very different than a need you, through your psychology and the manifestation of your biology, that you manifest, that you throw into the world. You create the problem of your desire by existing. It now needs resolution. It now needs to be comforted. I mean, in both circumstances, there's a entity in need of comfort. The distinction is the generation of the perception that there needs to be a resolution, and that resolution, the logic is just applied, that if you could control either one of those circumstances, the control would be to prevent them in the first place. That's the logical thing to do with need, is not to resolve need, but to prevent need. It's the simplest solution to the need dilemma. There's no such thing, I guess, in forceful argument. If you're going to go to the extreme, there's no such thing as a positively felt need. You can't generate. There's no need you generate that is intrinsically positive, because the only needs you can generate that are of any positive values are recognitions of value, not creations of value. Because all your other needs are going to be negative. They're intrinsically create the problem, the dilemma of why is this not adequate? I mean, this circumstance is somehow not adequate. There needs to be a change. I need to go somewhere else and do something else, because this isn't going to be good enough. And that's the problem created by creating sentience. So anyway, I will do some analysis of the linked garbage, but it's going to be tricky just because it is so convoluted. I mean, they're putting abstractions on top of abstractions and conditionals on top of conditionals, and you have to go through a lot of work to unravel the individually, specifically the sentence, the notion that's breaking the logic. Anyway, till the next time. Such. A little add-on. I wasn't going to do that. But anyway, a little breezy also. And I'm a little deaf too. Anyway, there's a bird in the tree annoying me. And I just tripped. That's how I broke my toenail, I think. Kicking rocks is not a good idea. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, the add-on. Yeah, so they do all this stupid math, A, B, C, D, whatever. In terms of doing this value equation, which, Conference Report doesn't apparently like that term, value equation. So somehow for him, it's just not adequate to the circumstance to attempt to quantify the experiential, You can't quantify experiences. It's not the most important thing in the universe to do, but no, silly thing to do. And then the conclusion in this paper too was just kind of funny. The conclusion was that life is neither a harm nor a good. Whatever. It's kind of silly. And that when somebody's born in a horrible circumstance, the world's worse off, but it's not worse off for anyone. I don't know exactly how that makes sense, but whatever. I guess anyone other than the person being tortured. So I guess rape is only bad for the victim. Yeah, now I get the math. Yeah, that math makes so much more sense, Conference Report. The math where the victim doesn't exist makes so much more sense, of course. Just eliminate the victim and everything works out fine. Yeah. No. Anyway, I guess I wanted to get back to was the need creation problem. The fact that we have to understand what the word need is. The whole idea of something being necessary and what that means. That only necessary things can be expensive things, by logic. Just by the nature of the unfortunate beast. And likewise, that would, again, I've made this argument, but intelligence has no function besides saying, here's a condition, here's a better condition. And so it tries to get you from the lesser condition to the greater condition. And that's all it's good for, is to migrate sentient organisms from a lesser condition to a superior condition. And again, when it comes to this idea of creating, we are procreating. Gee, it's just such an obvious, right, in the word, procreating. That there's the obligation has to be to understand the consequences of the creation, and that it's is it in a lesser condition by not being created, and that's where it breaks down, because there is no lesser condition or greater condition for the non-existent. Their circumstance can't be improved and it can't be degraded in this essence of their existence. They're non-existent. So they're invulnerable to the need for condition change. Condition upgrade does not apply. And as soon as you do create, then you have the dilemma of condition upgrade. The fact that it can exist, an existent can exist in a lesser condition than the possible. And then again we get into the whole probability thing, that it's not so much about what's possible. The more pertinent question is what's likely and probable.